The Price of Survival, From Mud to Majesty to Myth Part 1, The Middle Ages, a day you wouldn't survive. Hey everyone. Tonight we're stepping back in time, not into the glittering castles of fairy tales, but into the filth, fear, and fever of the real Middle Ages. You blink your eyes open to darkness and smell it before you see it. Congratulations. You've woken up in the year 1325, somewhere in rural Europe. The good news? You're alive. The bad news? So are the fleas. Your bed is a half-rotted straw mat that smells like a goat shed because, frankly, it was one 3 months ago. There's no pillow, no sheets, and your blanket could double as armor, not because it's strong, but because it's caked in filth. The air is cold, damp, and filled with the sound of coughing, the kind of deep, chesty cough that echoes through every wall and every family. Your home is one room. You, your family, and probably a few chickens share it. The floor? Dirt. The ceiling? Thatched reeds with more holes than roof. The smell? A mix of stale beer, livestock, and regret. Hollywood lied to you. This isn't romantic. It's survival. The church bell outside rings, loud and merciless. That's your alarm clock. No snooze button. Just God reminding you it's time to suffer productively. You stretch and immediately regret it. Your joints ache like you're 80, but you're only 22. In medieval math, that's middle-aged. You shuffle across the cold floor, careful not to step on whatever your neighbor's rooster left behind. There's no privacy, no solitude, just life, crammed into every square inch. Welcome to morning in medieval Europe, where you never wake up alone because parasites and people are always beside you. The morning routine of misery nature calls. There's no toilet. There's a bucket, maybe two if your family's fancy. You step outside, gripping the freezing air, trying to avoid eye contact with your equally miserable neighbors. You do your business and then toss it into the street with a shout of "Gardez-lou!" An old French warning that basically means incoming human waste. The street, by the way, isn't really a street. It's an open sewer. Waste, animal droppings, rainwater, dead rats, all slowly drifting downhill towards someone else's doorstep. And if you're lucky enough to live in a town with public latrines, congratulations, you can now sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers doing synchronized misery. Toilet paper? Unheard of. Moss, straw, or your hand, take your pick. Hygiene is a rumor from the future. Breakfast of the damned, you survived the toilet. You deserve a reward. Sadly, this isn't Starbucks. Breakfast is a bowl of pottage, a sludge-like stew that's been simmering for days, maybe weeks. Every morning, your family adds new scraps on top of yesterday's leftovers. It's not a meal. It's an ecosystem. On the side, a loaf of bread that could double as a medieval weapon. Hard, coarse, baked from rye or barley, mixed with sawdust or acorns. Wheat? That's for the nobility, and to wash it down. Beer. Everyone drinks it, even the kids. Not because it's fun, but because it's safer than water, which is basically liquid cholera. It's weak ale, low alcohol, high survival. So you sip your breakfast beer, chew your rock bread, and dream of a time when food doesn't fight back. Dress code. Misery. Chic. Your entire wardrobe fits in one sentence. A wool tunic, 2 socks that don't match, and despair. You wear the same clothes every day until they dissolve or catch fire. Washing them requires fetching water, boiling it, scrubbing with ashes, and praying the lice don't notice. Most people don't bother. Every inch of fabric is stiff with grime and alive with something that bites. Underwear? Optional. Soap? A luxury. Shoes? If you're lucky, leather scraps. Most go barefoot through mud, dung, and snow. You itch constantly. Everyone does. Fleas are the great equalizer. Noble or peasant, they feast without discrimination. You scratch, you sneeze, and you keep going. Because that's medieval fashion. Filthy but functional. Dental disaster and death by dentist, you flash a smile, or what's left of it. No toothbrush, no toothpaste, no concept of oral hygiene. By your mid-20s, your gums are swollen, your teeth brown, and your breath could be weaponized. If you get a toothache, there's only one cure. Find the barber surgeon. The same guy who cuts your hair will yank your molar with an iron hook, no anesthesia. If the infection spreads, you die. All from a tooth. Forget TikTok smiles. In the Middle Ages, a full set of teeth was fantasy fiction. Work until you break. You're a peasant. That means you work the land for someone richer than you'll ever meet. From sunrise to sunset, 6 days a week. Your tools are crude, your pay is survival, and your retirement plan is death. If you're a woman, double it. You work the fields, raise children, cook, clean, and hope childbirth doesn't kill you. Children join the workforce at 5. No school, no toys, just smaller shovels. You work through hunger, pain, infection, and fatigue, because stopping means starvation. In this world, exhaustion is not an excuse. It's the baseline. The weather always wins winter. Miserable. Your house leaks, your firewood is damp, and frostbite is normal. Summer, worse. Your home turns into an oven. You can't bathe, and every fly in Europe finds you. There's no sunscreen, no fans, no mercy. You just sweat, itch, and pray. The weather doesn't just ruin your day, it defines your life. Medicine or medieval torture, you get sick. Everyone does. You pray for healing. You get leeches instead. Medicine in the Middle Ages is based on humours, blood, phlegm, bile, and more bile. If you're ill, a doctor decides one fluid is out of balance. The cure: drain you, literally. You might be bled, purged, or smoked like a ham. Surgery happens without anesthesia. Sterilization? Not invented yet. The tools look like medieval torture devices because they are medieval torture devices. You don't recover because of the doctor. You recover despite them. Faith, fear, and fire religion rules your life. The church decides when you wake, work, fast, feast, marry, confess, and die. Miss Mass? Sin. Eat meat on a Friday? Sin. Dream of the neighbor's wife? Double sin. You can't read the Bible, it's in Latin. The priest interprets it for you, and his interpretation is law. Question him and you're a heretic. Heretics burn. Faith is everywhere. Fear is its twin. You pray for salvation in a world that offers none. Women. Life on hard mode. If you're born female, the game starts on nightmare difficulty. Marry at 14, bear children until you die, and never speak too loudly. Your worth is tied to your husband and your womb. Childbirth is a gamble. Infection, hemorrhage, death. Midwives do what they can, but nature doesn't care. You don't own property. You don't have freedom. You have endurance. Yet, through all this, women keep families alive, hold communities together, and carry the world's weight without thanks or rest. Violence. The background music of life, law, and order are abstract concepts. Punishment is public entertainment. Theft, lose a hand. Blasphemy, lose your tongue. Witchcraft, lose your life. Crowds gather for hangings, burnings, and beheadings. Children watch. It's not horror. It's Tuesday. Wars, feuds, raids. Violence isn't chaos. It's culture. Everyone lives within sword's reach of death, and everyone knows it. Death comes early, and often half of all children die before age 5. Adults rarely reach 40. A splinter can turn septic. The flu can finish you. Plague sweeps through towns like a shadow, erasing entire generations. When you die, there's no embalming, no polished coffin, just a shallow grave, a whispered prayer, and a world that keeps turning without you. And yet, they lived. Despite all of this, the filth, the fear, the fragility, people laughed. They sang, they fell in love, they told stories by firelight. Humanity endured, clinging to joy like a spark in the dark. That spark, that refusal to give up, is what carries civilization forward. And it's what will carry us into our next chapter. Catherine the Great. From pawn to power, The camera rises over the snow-choked plains of 18th century Russia. A carriage rattles towards St. Petersburg, its wheels carving twin scars through the frost. Inside sits a 14-year-old German princess named Sophie Friederike August von Anhalt-Zerbst. She stares through the glass at a world of ice and possibility. She doesn't yet know it, but she's on her way to steal an empire. The girl who learned to listen, born in 1729 to a minor Prussian noble family, Sophie grew up in a small duchy that possessed more ambition than land. Her mother, Johanna, was shrewd and status-hungry. Her father, a disciplined officer who spoke more to his books than his daughter. So Sophie learned to listen, really listen, to every sigh in a room, every flicker of power that crossed a face. She devoured books, memorized manners, and mastered silence. In the candlelight of her tiny chamber, she practiced the art of smiling without surrendering, bowing without bending. It was the sort of education no tutor could give, one that would later save her life. A bride for an empire in 1744, Russia's ruler, Empress Elizabeth Petrovna, sought a bride for her eccentric heir. Grand Duke Peter, a German-born prince who worshipped toy soldiers and Prussian beer more than God or governance. The Empress wanted a foreign girl, obedient, clever, easy to mold. Sophie seemed perfect. She arrived in St. Petersburg in a thin German gown, stepping from her sleigh into a storm of rumors and rivalries. The court glittered like frost, beautiful from afar, lethal up close. Within weeks she was forced to abandon her Lutheran faith, baptized into Orthodoxy as Ekaterina Alexeyevna, Catherine. The name was Russian. The resolve beneath it was still her own. At 16 she married Peter. The wedding was grand. The marriage was not. He was childish, volatile and cruel in that lazy way peculiar to the protected. She learned again to listen, to flatter, to survive. Behind her courtesy, Catherine read Voltaire and Montesquieu in secret, whispering Enlightenment phrases like prayers in a hostile church. The court thought her meek. She was memorizing the map of power. The waiting game. For 17 years, Catherine lived inside a palace cage, gilded with suspicion. Her husband's temper worsened. Her mother meddled. Spies tracked her every gesture. She played the dutiful wife while quietly building alliances among officers of the Imperial Guard, ladies of influence, and a handful of intellectuals who believed Russia could be more than superstition in uniform. When Empress Elizabeth died in 1762, Peter finally became Tsar Peter III, and immediately began alienating everyone who mattered. He insulted the army, mocked the church, reversed policies, and bragged about replacing Orthodox icons with portraits of his idol Frederick the Great. Catherine watched in silence. Every insult her husband hurled was another brick removed from his own throne. The coup of velvet and steel on a July dawn in 1762, the streets of St. Petersburg echoed with hoofbeats. Catherine rode at the head of the Imperial Guards, clad in green uniform, cross at her breast, fire in her eyes. By noon she was proclaimed Empress of all the Russias. Peter fled, surrendered, and, days later, was found dead in captivity. Officially, hemorrhoidal colic. In reality, history's polite synonym for assassination. Catherine never spoke of it again. She had seized power without a single pitched battle. A foreign-born woman now ruled the world's largest empire. But taking a throne is one act. Keeping it is a lifetime. The philosopher on the throne, Catherine, understood that crowns are held by ideas as much as by armies. She styled herself an enlightened monarch, writing letters to Voltaire that sparkled with wit and calculation. She invited Diderot to court, bought his library to rescue him from debt, and founded schools, academies, and journals. Her 1767 nakaz, the instruction to her legislative commission, declared that laws should serve the common good, and torture was a crime against reason. It was revolutionary on parchment, though cautious in practice. Russia remained chained by serfdom, and Catherine knew breaking those chains outright would shatter the nobles who kept her in power. So she balanced on the razor's edge, reformer in speech, realist in rule. She expanded education, encouraged vaccination, built hospitals, and quietly reaffirmed the aristocracy's grip on their serfs. To govern an empire that spanned 11 time zones, she learned to compromise with its contradictions. War and the making of an empire. Catherine did not only read philosophers, she commanded generals. Her gaze turned south to the Ottoman Empire. Between 1768 and 1774, Russian armies under Suvorov and Potemkin stormed the Black Sea coast, capturing Crimea and securing warm water ports that Russia had coveted for centuries. To the west, she joined Austria and Prussia in the partitions of Poland, slicing a kingdom off the map like a loaf of bread. By 1795, Russia had absorbed millions of new subjects and vast new lands. Critics called her ruthless. She called it destiny. Each victory redrew Europe's borders and rewrote her legend. The girl who once arrived shivering in a sleigh now ruled from the Baltic to the Black Sea. Power, she believed, was proof of purpose. Potemkin and the architecture of ambition among Catherine's many admirers. One stood apart, Grigory Potemkin, soldier, visionary, and her equal in appetite and intellect. Their partnership blurred the line between love and governance. Together they dreamed cities into existence: Kherson, Sevastopol, Odessa, outposts of empire on freshly conquered soil. Their letters burned with politics and passion. He called her my sovereign and my soul. She called him my eagle. Even after their affair cooled, their friendship endured. His death in 1791 left her bereft in ways she never admitted aloud. The rebellion that changed. Her in 1773. A Cossack named Yemelyan Pugachev claimed to be the murdered Peter III and led tens of thousands of peasants in revolt. Towns burned. Nobles were slaughtered. For a year the empire trembled. When her troops finally crushed the rebellion, Catherine rode the shock like a storm surge. The Enlightenment ideals she had paraded before Europe now looked naive against the fury of the poor. She tightened control, expanded censorship, and granted nobles even greater authority over their serfs. Reason had met reality and blinked. It was the pivot of her reign, from dreamer to defender, from philosopher to pragmatic sovereign. Scandal and survival Europe loved her brilliance and despised her audacity. A woman ruling like a man offended the natural order, or at least the male one. Pamphleteers mocked her lovers, her age, her intellect. The grotesque myth of the horse was their parting insult, a slander born of envy. Catherine ignored them. She continued to write, to build, to command. She rewarded former lovers with titles and pensions, turned gossip into strategy, and never apologized for pleasure or power. "I praise loudly," she once said. "I blame softly." But she forgot to add, she never forgets. The mother of the empire. By the 1790s, Catherine had ruled for 3 decades, the longest reigning female monarch in Russian history. She founded the Hermitage Museum, filled it with art she loved but barely had time to see. She modernized schools, reformed administration, and inoculated herself publicly to prove that science mattered more than superstition. Yet she never solved the riddle of serfdom. Enlightenment could illuminate palaces, but not plough fields. When she died in 1796, Russia was richer, larger, stronger, and still unfree. Her enemies called her a usurper. Her subjects called her Velikaya, the Great. History called her inevitable. The Red Queen of Palenque, the woman who would not vanish. The screen fades from imperial marble to a wall of green. Mist curls through the canopy of a jungle, older than any empire. Cicadazon. Somewhere beneath the vines and roots of Chiapas, southern Mexico, something ancient breathes. The year is 1994, a team of Mexican archaeologists led by Fanny Lopez Jimenez is mapping a modest pyramid beside the Temple of the Inscriptions, the great tomb of the Maya king Pakal the Great. The structure is small, humble, overlooked, but then deep beneath its base, the earth gives up a secret, a sealed chamber, untouched, unlooted, undisturbed for over 13 centuries. When the archaeologists breach the passage and descend by torchlight, the air is thick, heavy, almost alive. The beam of a flashlight sweeps across a limestone coffin. The stone lid groans open, and what rises from the darkness is a shock of color, red dust, red walls, red bones. A woman, entirely drenched in crimson powder. History would name her the Red Queen of Palenque. The woman in red inside the sarcophagus lies a skeleton, delicate and regal. Her skull still bears a jade mosaic mask. Around her neck gleam jade beads, shells, and carved ornaments. The entire tomb glows faintly red, coated in powdered cinnabar, a mercury sulfide pigment the ancient Maya believed connected blood, rebirth, and divinity. This was not a hasty burial. It was a coronation for the dead. Her jewelry is elite, her placement deliberate, her body laid on jaguar skin, a symbol of the underworld and royal power. Every artifact whispers reverence. Whoever she was sacred, but her name erased. No glyphs, no inscriptions, no titles on the walls. Just silence and scarlet dust. The meaning of red to the Maya, color was language. Red was not decoration, it was theology. It symbolized life, blood, and the sunrise, the eternal pulse that connected mortals to gods. To bathe a body in cinnabar was to wrap it in immortality, but cinnabar was more than sacred. It was deadly. Prolonged exposure causes mercury poisoning, tremors, hallucinations, madness. The Maya likely did not know the chemistry, but they felt the danger. The pigment shimmered like divine fire, extracted from deep veins of stone, precious and perilous. Covering her in it was both an offering and a declaration. This woman had crossed beyond the ordinary. She was not buried to be forgotten. She was buried to be transformed. Echoes of a lost dynasty, the Red Queen's tomb sits only steps away from that of Pakal the Great, one of the most celebrated rulers in Maya history. His pyramid, the Temple of the Inscriptions, rises like a stone mountain, carved with hieroglyphs that tell his life, death, and resurrection. The proximity is no coincidence. The Maya built their temples as mirrors of the cosmos. To be entombed beside a king was not random, it was cosmological alignment. Most scholars believe the Red Queen was Tsakbu Ajau, Pakal's wife and queen consort. She was born of noble lineage and married into the Palenque dynasty, giving birth to future kings. In life, she may have been priestess and diplomat, linking rival royal houses. DNA analysis in the 2000s found no blood relation to Pakal, which rules out mother or sister, but not wife. 2 royal burials, 2 bodies painted in red, 2 lives bound by ritual even beyond death. If Pakal was the sun, brilliant, masculine, reborn each dawn, then the Red Queen was the moon, veiled, cyclical, eternal for a tomb designed for silence. Her crypt lies deep within Temple 3, accessible only by a narrow staircase descending into the core of the pyramid. The chamber itself is simple, no murals, no inscriptions, no grand carvings, just precision-cut limestone and the echo of stillness. Yet the architecture speaks through absence. The tomb's axis runs east to west, mirroring the path of the sun across the sky, a metaphor for the soul's journey from life to death, from dawn to dusk. The sarcophagus sits at the center like an altar. Around it, ceramic vessels once held offerings, cacao, maize, perhaps even pulque, spiritual fuel for the voyage through the underworld, known to the Maya as Xibalba. Everything here is intentional, nothing accidental. The builders sealed the chamber perfectly, ensuring it would never be disturbed, and for over a millennium it wasn't. The treasures of transition archaeologists catalogued her grave goods with awe. A jade mask, pieced together like mosaic skin, symbolizing identity preserved beyond decay. Necklaces and diadems of polished jade, each bead representing breath and eternity. Bone needles and obsidian blades, ritual tools for bloodletting, acts of sacrifice that kept cosmic balance. Shell ornaments linking her to the watery realms of the underworld. Ceramic vessels, sealed, still containing traces of pigment and ash. Unlike Egyptian pharaohs surrounded by gold, this queen was encircled by meaning. Her tomb was not built for display. It was built for transformation. In Maya cosmology, death was not an end, it was migration. The Red Queen's burial was a roadmap. Blood to rebirth, jade to immortality, silence to divinity. Women of power in the Maya world for centuries. Historians viewed ancient Mesoamerica as a world ruled solely by men. The Red Queen's tomb shattered that illusion. Across Maya cities, Yaxchilan, Naranjo, Calakmul, stelae depict queens performing rituals, holding scepters, even leading ceremonies of war and diplomacy. Power flowed through bloodlines, and women carried those lines as much as they bore them. At Palenque, queens like Sakkuk, Pakal's mother, ruled as regents, presiding over temples and courtly life. The Red Queen fits into this lineage, a matriarch whose authority was spiritual as well as political. Her jade mask, her cinnabar shroud, her proximity to the king, all mark her as a figure of sacred continuity. She wasn't an accessory to power, she was half of it. The afterlife of the Red Queen, when her tomb was first opened, archaeologists noticed how the cinnabar dust clung to everything, skin, tools, even air. It glittered like breath made visible. Some scientists grew dizzy after hours inside, overwhelmed by the metallic fumes. It was as though time itself was exhaling. The Red Queen had waited over 1,000 years for witnesses, and when they arrived, she greeted them not with silence but with color. She spoke in red. Even now, her bones and jewels are preserved in Palenque's museum, protected under glass, the cinnabar still luminous under artificial light. Scientists continue to test her DNA, to model her face, to find her name. But the mystery remains, as if she prefers it that way, because what is remembered can be rewritten, what is unknown endures. Architecture of immortality, Palenque itself rises like a dream half swallowed by the jungle. Its temples aligned to celestial patterns, its walls engraved with myths of rebirth and the divine descent of kings. The Red Queen's tomb sits on this cosmic stage, a quiet counterpart to Pakal's monumental story. His sarcophagus lid shows him falling into the jaws of the underworld and rising again as the maze god, the eternal cycle of life. Her tomb shows nothing, only red. Perhaps her story was meant to be invisible, an initiation, not a declaration. A whisper, not a proclamation. If Pakal embodied the journey of the sun, the Red Queen embodied the night that gives the sun its meaning. Together, they form a duality, masculine and feminine, death and renewal, silence and revelation. Two halves of the same sacred rhythm that defined Maya cosmology. The power of absence history often forgets women, not because they were unimportant, but because they were dangerous to remember. The Red Queen threatens the comfortable story of kings and conquest. She proves that leadership can be quiet, ritual, unseen, that influence can lie not in inscriptions, but in presence. Her lack of a name forces us to confront a truth. Sometimes mystery itself is legacy. She doesn't need words carved in stone to matter. She exists in the tension between silence and awe. The Red Queen is not forgotten. She is unfinished. 10. The last breath of the jungle today. The jungle reclaims Palenque, inch by inch. Roots twist through temples, parrots scream over broken stairs, and rain seeps into stone. But inside that sealed chamber, the Red Queen still sleeps in her crimson veil. When visitors walk the site, they see the towering temple of the inscriptions and the smaller, humbler pyramid beside it. Most don't realize that inside that second temple lies one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world, a queen without a name, whose tomb radiates power even in silence. She reminds us that history isn't just written in ink or carved in stone. Sometimes it's written in dust, red dust that clings to skin and memory alike. The Red Queen never spoke, yet her silence outlived kingdoms, and in that silence she still reigns. Frida Kahlo, the woman who painted pain into immortality. The jungle fades. The red dust of the Maya dissolves into a new kind of red. The painted walls of La Casa Azul, the blue house in Coyoacán, Mexico. The air smells of turpentine and bougainvillea. Birds chatter. In the courtyard, sunlight breaks across cobalt walls and potted cacti. And inside, at a small wooden easel beneath a mirror, sits a woman with dark eyes and an expression that sees through time. Frida Kahlo. 1. The making of a rebel Frida was born in 1907, though she liked to say 1910, to tie her birth to the Mexican Revolution. Even in numbers she rewrote herself. Her father, Guillermo Kahlo, a German-Hungarian photographer. Her mother, Matilde Calderon, a devout Catholic of indigenous and Spanish descent. Their house was divided between faith and reason, camera lenses and crucifixes. As a child, Frida was bold, mischievous, already political. At 6, she contracted polio, leaving her right leg thinner, weaker. While other children teased her, she taught herself defiance. She walked with a limp and a glare that dared anyone to notice. Her father encouraged her to box, to climb, to cycle, to think. Her mother taught her endurance through silence. Between them, Frida learned 2 essential languages: observation and survival. At 15, she entered Mexico City's National Preparatory School, one of few girls among hundreds of boys. She studied medicine, wore men's clothes, read Marx, and laughed louder than was considered decent. She joined a student circle called the Cachuchas, pranksters and radicals. Even then, she was building a legend, half scholar, half troublemaker, wholly herself. She planned to become a doctor. Fate had other plans. The crash, September 17th, 1925. A hot afternoon. Frida and her boyfriend Alejandro Gomez Arias boarded a wooden bus after class. They argued lightly about politics, love, life, and then the world exploded. A streetcar smashed into the bus. Wood shattered like glass. Iron pierced flesh. When the dust settled, Frida lay broken on the street, an iron handrail impaled through her pelvis, exiting near her spine. Her ribs were crushed, her leg shattered, her collarbone broken. A man covered her with his coat and noticed something strange. Her body glittered. A pouch of gold powder she'd been carrying had burst, covering her in metallic dust. She looked like a fallen saint. They rushed her to the Red Cross hospital. Dozens of surgeries followed. Weeks of fever, infection, pain. Doctors said she might never walk again. Flat on her back, encased in plaster, she stared at the ceiling, and the ceiling stared back. Her mother built her a special easel so she could paint lying down. A mirror was fixed above her bed so she could see her reflection, and that's where it began, with brushes, paint, and a mirror. Frida Kahlo painted herself because she was all she had left. Turning pain into language at first, she painted for therapy, small images on tin, inspired by Mexican retablos, folk devotional paintings. But her canvases grew bolder, stranger, truer. She painted herself split open, bleeding, pierced, reborn, but always watching. Her gaze never begged sympathy. It demanded recognition. Every brushstroke said, this happened. I'm still here. Her early works combined Catholic iconography, Aztec symbols, and medical diagrams. Pain became anatomy. Emotion became architecture. She once said, "I paint myself because I am so often alone, and because I am the subject I know best." What emerged wasn't fantasy. It was autobiography turned inside out. A surrealism too real for the surrealists. Diego in 1928, she brought her paintings to Diego Rivera, already Mexico's most famous muralist, older, massive, magnetic, a living storm of ego and genius. He looked at her small panels, smiled and said, "You have talent." He meant it. They fell into orbit, opposites yet inevitable. When they married a year later, her parents called it the union of an elephant and a dove. Their love was volcanic, creative, political, destructive. Diego believed in her art, promoted her exhibitions, and betrayed her endlessly. Affairs, models, even her sister Cristina. When Frida found out, she cut off her long hair, painted herself as both bride and corpse, and moved out. But she could never fully leave. Their relationship defied logic. It was a revolution in two bodies. She once said, "I suffered two accidents in my life. One was the streetcar. The other was Diego." They divorced in 1939 and remarried a year later under new terms. Separate homes, separate finances, shared chaos. America and disillusion. During the 1930s, Frida followed Diego across the United States as he painted massive industrial murals in San Francisco, Detroit, New York. To her, America was dazzling and disgusting, skyscrapers built beside slums, banquets beside hunger. She miscarried in Detroit. The pain became her painting Henry Ford Hospital, Frida lying naked on a hospital bed, umbilical cords tying her to floating symbols, a fetus, a snail, a machine. It was brutally honest, medically precise, emotionally devastating. She missed Mexico's dirt, its colors, its contradictions. "I felt so lonely," she wrote, "that even God was not there." In New York, she met Georgia O'Keeffe, André Breton, and the Surrealists who adored her. They called her the most surreal painter in the Americas. She corrected them. "I never paint dreams. I paint my own reality." Returned to Mexico. By the late 1930s, she was home again, and home became her universe. La Casa Azul turned into a sanctuary of art and politics, monkeys in the garden, skeleton dolls on the shelves, Trotsky hiding in a spare bedroom, revolutionaries at dinner. Frida dressed like a living painting, embroidered Tijuana dresses, flowers in her hair, rings on every finger. Each outfit was armor and identity, an homage to indigenous Mexico and a rebellion against Western norms. Her self-portraits from this era glowed with color and sorrow. In the two Fridas, she paints two versions of herself, one European, bleeding, heart exposed, the other indigenous, serene, heart intact. A single artery connects them. It's not just about love lost. It's about dual identity, colonial legacy, and the battle inside every colonized soul. By now, Frida's image was inseparable from her art. She was the art, defiant, wounded, radiant. Politics of passion. Frida's art and politics were inseparable. She joined the Mexican Communist Party, marched in protests, hosted exiled revolutionaries. To her, painting was not decoration, it was resistance. When the exiled Leon Trotsky lived at Casa Azul, she and Diego offered refuge, and, according to rumor, more than that. Frida lived by her own moral code, love without apology, loyalty to ideas over institutions. Every painting she made was an act of rebellion, against patriarchy, against colonialism, against pain itself, and yet her body continued to betray her. Spinal surgeries, infections, amputations. By her 40s, she was often confined to bed, her torso bound in metal corsets, her legs wrapped in bandages. Still, she painted. Still she laughed. Still she cursed dictators between sips of tequila. The Broken Column in 1944, she painted one of her most haunting works, The Broken Column. Frida stands bare, her body split open, a cracked ionic column replacing her spine. Nails pierce her flesh. Tears streak her face, but her eyes stare forward, steady, proud. It's not a plea. It's a proclamation. Pain, she says, does not define me. I define it. Her paintings from this decade fuse anatomy and myth, science and spirituality. She turns her own suffering into universal iconography, a language of endurance anyone can understand. Recognition and defiance. By the early 1950s, Frida was internationally celebrated. Her art hung in Paris, New York, Mexico City. Picasso praised her portraits. Breton called her a ribbon around a bomb. In 1953, she received her first solo exhibition in Mexico. Doctors forbade her from attending. She arrived by ambulance, carried inside on a stretcher, placed in her bed at the gallery's center. Guests gathered around her, toasting with tequila as she laughed and sang. That image, a woman in a hospital bed surrounded by her own paintings, captured everything she was. Fragile and fierce, mortal and mythic. Months later, gangrene forced the amputation of her right leg. She wrote in her diary, "Feet, what do I need you for when I have wings to fly?" 10. Viva la vida. Frida's final painting. A still life of watermelons bursts with color. On one slice she scrawled, "Viva la vida, long live life." In July 1954, she died in her sleep at age 47. Official cause, pulmonary embolism. Unofficial cause, exhaustion from existing too fiercely for too long. At her funeral in the Palacio de Bellas Artes, her coffin was draped in the red flag of the Communist Party. Diego wept uncontrollably, whispering that he had loved her too late, too poorly, too endlessly, but Frida didn't vanish. She multiplied. The afterlife of an icon decades later. The world rediscovered her, first through feminist scholars in the 1970s, then through artists, activists, and dreamers everywhere. Her self-portraits became mirrors for anyone who'd ever felt broken or different or unseen. She became more than a painter. She became a symbol of feminism, a woman who refused to apologize for power or pain, of queerness, proudly bisexual in an age of silence, of disability, turning her wounded body into art that defied pity, of Mexican identity, celebrating indigenous beauty and national pride. Her face, the unibrow, the flowers, the fire, adorns murals, posters, T-shirts, tattoos. But beneath the commercial image beats the same defiant heart that once lay beneath a broken spine. She taught the world that art is not about escaping pain. It's about surviving through it. 12. Legacy walk through La Casa Azul today, and you can still feel her. The scent of paint, the color of cobalt, the ghosts of laughter echoing off the courtyard tiles. Her wheelchair sits before her easel, brushes still stained. Her corsets hang like relics of war. Frida Kahlo didn't just paint herself. She painted all of us, our fractures, our contradictions, our hope. She turned agony into art, identity into revolution, suffering into celebration. In one of her last diary entries, she wrote, "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return." But she did return, in every artist who dares to paint their truth, in every soul who refuses to hide their scars. Frida didn't escape pain. She crowned it, and through her, pain learned to speak. Closing, the human thread from medieval peasants clawing through mud, to an empress reshaping an empire, to a queen buried in red dust, to a painter who bled color onto canvas. One thing binds them all, the will to endure. Civilizations rise, empires fall, bodies break, names fade. But the human pulse, the stubborn, fragile insistence to create meaning out of suffering, never stops. That's the real history of us, the courage to survive, and to make survival beautiful.